Ladies and gentlemen, benvenuti, welcome. My name is Achilles Soltis. I'm the president of the Democracy and Culture Foundation, and it gives me immense pleasure to be at Palazzo Reale. It's been a year-long journey for us to get here, and we're delighted with the collaboration with the municipality of Milano. At the same time, we are deeply, deeply saddened and shocked with the death of Courtney, as most of the arts, all of the arts and culture sector community is. So I'd like us to reflect on all the great work that she's done and ask for a moment's silence. May she rest in peace, and may her legacy live forever. It's my pleasure to invite Deputy Mayor Tommaso Sacchi, with whom we have partnered this year, and not only this year. He will tell us all about it. Tommaso.
Buongiorno, buongiorno a tutte e a tutti voi. Benvenuti a Palazzo Reale. Now I will switch to English language. First of all, participating also on behalf of the city of Milan to the great loss of Courtney, and thank you, Achilles, for this moment of silence to her. We are truly delighted to welcome you all in Milano on this important conversation on the institution of the future, held in the magnificent Palazzo Reale, and I'm very happy you are all here, in partnership with Yes Milano, the public agency of promotion of the city of Milan, in the Democracy and Culture Foundation, thank you again, the New York Times, as part of Art for Tomorrow 2025. I want, first of all, to mention the great job, and a big round of applause to Stefano Boeri and his team for the Triennale Milano, for inequalities as a measure moment through architecture, design, and art of reflection on our times. This panel is a chance to step back and ask ourselves, what are the institutions for, in a world that seems to change faster than ever? And what should they become in order to remain relevant, accessible, and alive? These are the questions. It is not a secret that we live in a time of profound transformation, social, political, and technological, and cultural institutions are not immune. They're not out of this debate. They are at the center. On the contrary, they are really the core center of the storm. But that's also what makes this vital. Museums and cultural foundations can be places of connection, of imagination, of healing, and resilience. If we are brave enough to rethink their purpose and reshape the models, here today in Milano, we believe that culture is not just a tool for urban branding. It is, on the contrary, a public true infrastructure of our life. That's why we invest in it as a driver of inclusion, of innovation, and social cohesion. We see that cultural institutions not as a monument, but as a dynamic space. And this is one of the main topics of the debate, in dialogue with the city and its contradictions. The guests on today's panel will be formally introduced in a moment through truth to be told. None of them really needs an introduction, as you all know. We're joined by some of the most brilliant and influential voices of contemporary culture, whose work continues to challenge, to inspire, and to define the institutional landscape. So let me simply thank all the contributors, the panelists, and the people who joined Milan for this special occasion. And again, a great thank you to all the people that made it possible. Thank you, Achilles, for being with us. This was a challenge, and now we are listening to the main protagonists of our time here in Milan. And that's because of your job and the job of your team. So thank you so much. Grazie.
Thank you for your partnership. So this evening we have a very special event, and it is the Creativity of Social Change Award, which we'll speak about shortly. But before we get into that, there is one very special panel. Last night at the Triennale, and we're grateful for the partnership there as well. It's a great alignment between our programming and the inequalities theme. So last night we had a great panel on creativity for the future. So now we're going to talk about the institutions of the future. And Farah Nayeri, my dear colleague, is going to lead this discussion, this panel of our four distinguished panelists. So I call you all up on stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome to all of you here. It's wonderful to be in the Palazzo Reale in Milan, and I wanted to thank Tommaso Sacchi for hosting us in some of the greatest buildings and monuments and institutions of Milan. It makes a real difference to have a conference inside these great historic institutions, and I also, of course, include the Triennale. My name is Farah Nayeri, and I write on culture for the New York Times. And this panel, of course, in this panel, I'm going to turn to these four luminaries of our time and ask them to define what the museum or the institution of the future should look like. But before I do, I just thought I'd tell you a little story or give you a little preamble, just to get you thinking. If you make a visit to the Louvre Museum in Paris these days, your experience, believe it or not, will not be all that different from the experience of a visitor in the late 18th century, when the Louvre Museum first opened to the public in the aftermath of the French Revolution. Yes, there is a glass pyramid nowadays. Yes, your ticket is an electronic barcode on your smartphone. It would not have been the case in the 18th century. But you're basically looking at master paintings in gilded frames. You're looking at marble sculptures like the Venus de Milo. And you're looking at antiquities, including from the Persian Empire, which is my country of origin, displayed in glass vitrines. So it's not like there's been a huge revolution or transformation. And as far as I'm concerned, that's great. I love museums, and I love them just the way they are, to paraphrase the song. But to younger generations, they can seem old-fashioned places. And some of you may have heard of a pair of art commentators in the UK called the White Pube, spelled P-U-B-E. And I'm sorry, but that is how they're called. And they started a website a few years ago, and they regularly put out columns in which they attack museums. And here are excerpts from a column that one of them wrote a few years ago. I'm over going to museums to look at important things that don't align with what I really enjoy, she said. Big blockbuster exhibitions just show the same people, things, and conservative ideas on rotation. Why are we brainwashed to think we have to go whispering around these exhibitions in order to keep our finger on the pulse? What pulse does Andy Warhol even have? He's been dead for a long time. So this is a viewpoint of this group of commentators, but it's not all that uncommon among the very young generations. I think if you go and speak to your children or young people around you, you might find that they kind of say or believe that. So museum directors have been trying to address these grievances. In fact, all of the people on this panel, I think, will speak to that, trying to make museums more in sync with the times, less kind of old-fashioned, dusty, fusty, or whatever. And 25 years ago in London, there is a museum of a radically new kind which opened, which all of you have heard of, Tate Modern. It was a converted power station. It used to be an electricity utility power station, and they turned it into a museum. And millions of people poured into the entrance atrium called the Turbine Hall, and free of charge. And they took in massive art installations that were often experiential. A giant spider, a giant artificial sun that you could bask in, or tall slides that you could zip down. And Tate Modern changed the museum landscape, not just in London and not just in Britain. It turned the museum into something young people were actually keen on going to. Museums became cool. And today, art critics, as you know, are looking back on the first 25 years of Tate Modern, and they're delivering their assessments. And on the one hand, they say it's been a great immediate success. On the other hand, there has been a shift to spectacle. The museum becomes a destination, a place of amusement, almost like an art-filled amusement park, which is taking away from its mission of art. Those are the viewpoints. So what should the Museum of the Future look like? That's the question I'd like to put to my panelists, and I'll turn as my first panelist to a man who was instrumental in the creation and the birth of Tate Modern, Vicente Todolí, who was the second director of Tate Modern and who is now artistic director of the wonderful Pirelli HangarBicocca, which I'm sure you'll be visiting tomorrow. So Vicente, you were one of the first directors of Tate Modern. What are your thoughts or some of these comments? On the one hand, we're saying Tate Modern is one of the greatest museums of, it's the greatest museum of the 21st century. On the other hand, that it's turned art into spectacle. What is your response?
Well, it was completely unexpected because you remember the artists that we chose were not so well known at that time. For example, the first one was Louis Bourgeois. The spider was invented there and became an icon later. The second was a fantastic one. It was Juan Muñoz, which we reinstalled here and revived at HangarBicocca. And he never became a very popular artist. Then we had Anish Kapoor, that Marcias, occupying all the space. When we commissioned artists to engage, which was the essential space of the Tate Modern, of the building. It was the Turbine Hall, the place where energy happened. I called it the Cathedral of Energy, and we tried to test it to see if it could house exhibitions. It didn't work. We tried one with the collection, it looked lost. Said no, here only special commissions and only. So that's what we did. And the surprise was, just when 1 year after I was appointed, with Olafur Eliasson.
Yes.
Olafur Eliasson, it all came because of a TV station journalist. Because the artist, for him, it was just very physical, not illusional. It was not immersive. But you were supposed to go to the fourth floor and see how it was made. It was more about the physics and the mechanics than not about this kind of urban London night beach. But
I just want to know what you think of these comments that are being made about the turbine hall turning art into entertainment or...
No, but it was not. That's what I'm going to tell you. So this lady came with the TV and said, okay, the way you're supposed to see this is laying down on the floor and looking at yourself in the mirror, which was completely her interpretation. And that created this kind of uproar. People started coming here with some we had a group of Santa Claus dancing. We had people rowing, doing picnics. I mean, incredible things. It went out of our hands completely. We didn't expect it. And that's the reason why we said, okay, we can die of success. The ball has left the pitch. We need to bring back the ball into the pitch, the art into the place, and not just become a spectacle. So that's the reason the next commission was Bruce Nauman, an invisible work, just sound. So it got there. Then we had Kastenholler. Then it became also a big opera success. But the next one, it was Doris Salcedo, which we thought it would be completely... no, and besides being a tough artist and a very radical work, almost invisible, only the crack in the floor, we had lots of people again. So it became a destination no matter what we did.
I understand.
But that was never the intention. As a matter of fact, we have a program every time.
But I'm interested in the ideas behind these criticisms and what your thoughts are, what your responses is to the concept of Tate Modern has become a place of spectacle. Well, could I have people minimizing conversation? Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's the people that made it a spectacle, not the intention. It's like the art. The art, once the artist makes the art, it doesn't belong to the artist. It belongs into the world. And either he takes it, he can take it as an icon, or he can ignore it. That's not up to the artist. It's not up to the museum. We always stop that. Also, in the collection displays, people were, we had far too many people. And they were going very fast. They looked like people on the subway on rush hour, going from one place to the another. So we stopped half of it so that people would need to return and think over it, have some meditation, some room, you know. But yeah, we were aware that of the dangers of success.
Yeah. I see, yeah, you kind of were a little bit a victim of your success. I might move on to Courtney and just get the debate going on this. I mean, Courtney, just open-ended question. What is the future museum, or what should it be? And maybe you have some comment on Tate Modern and all the debate around it right now.
I benefited greatly from the origin of Tate Modern. I'm a bit like you.
How so?
Well, I'm a bit like you, that I was a foreigner working on another place, but trying to create an idea about that place. I was previously the director of the Yale Center for British Art, but I'd started my career at about the same time that Tate Modern opens as a historian of 20th century British art, which didn't exist as a field. That's, you know, it's laughable. People laughed at me. And I laughed back because I know it was right. You know, one of the great, I think, kind of moments of that is, you're right, the art is put out, people respond to it, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? Did it create a spectacle? Sometimes, but it also created incredible, you know, synergy around artists that weren't being shown in other places or weren't being shown in centralized places so that more people could see them. And so for every like gang of Santa Clauses that might have come, you also had, you know, high school kids coming from, you know, the regions in the, you know, in the UK, and for the first time getting to see really challenging and interesting art for free. And so I would take that spectacle all over again for what it also gave you. Mm-hmm. But to really answer your question, Farah, I do think that museums have changed. And I think that they have changed as we've changed. And so some of the kind of mercurial character I think that you see now with institutions climate change activism happening inside of institutions, while simultaneously people also want to have weddings in institutions. So you get the very conservative, the very traditional, but also the place at the museum as a platform for change about something that is allegedly unrelated to it. If museums meant nothing, then you just ignore them. But in fact, that they do mean something, mean that, something like the White View continues to be relevant, because her question is really, why do I care about this thing? Even though I'm staying, I don't care about it. I mean, that's classic teenage angst.
No, absolutely. Even though they're a little bit older than teenagers, but yeah. So Hans, again, open-ended question to you, whether you want to talk about Tate Modern. Hans Ulrich, as everyone knows, is artistic director of the Serpentine Galleries, and Courtney, I should have said, Courtney is the executive director of the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation in New York. Hans, what does this debate that we've started here inspire? I mean, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Farah. I think the future of the museum, Martha Rosler once said, the future always flies in under the radar. So I think, it's very difficult to basically define exactly what is the future of the museum. Because obviously also we never know what is the future of art, but we can create institutions which allow and enable, in a way, the future of art. And I think we can look at the extreme present, and from the extreme present think about maybe what the future of the museum should be. I think one of the things which is key, and Tommaso talked about it in the introduction, this idea of togetherness, and I think we live in a world which is increasingly polarized, and technology, which is always meant to actually bring us together, is creating filter bubbles, and we see a situation, I think, where museums have a key role in creating, a common future, in bringing worlds together. And I think museums can do that, basically building bridges between lots of different worlds. And I think that's something which will become more important in the future. It's something which, for our work at the Serpentine, is key. And of course, it was fascinating to see the example. Vicente was mentioning, artists like Karsten or Olafur have been doing that. They've been bringing art together with other worlds. And Jakob Kurt-Stinson spoke earlier today and is here in the audience. And we did a project at the Serpentine with Jakob, which created, in a way, a dialogue actually about deep time. I think the future of the museum has to go beyond short-termism. I think we live in a world which is too much caught in short-termism, deadlines, exhibitions, etc. And I think we need to think about the brodelli and longue durée. Jakob talked about deep time in this piece and created a dialogue, actually. It was a collaboration with BTS. And so all of a sudden, the world of art and the world of K-pop came together. And I think this idea that in museum we can bring worlds together, which otherwise don't talk to each other, collaborating with a footballer, with Juan Mata and my colleague Josh Reading on a show in Manchester, for the MIF this summer called Football City Art United, where we're going to bring the world of art and football together. So I think that's one thing, sort of bringing of worlds together. I think the other thing is deeply related to the amazing Triennale of Stefano, and we need to give Stefano another big round of applause because it is, in my view, the topic of inequality, which is so important. And I think free admission is one possibility to take away barrier of access. And free admission, of course, is important, in many of the examples Vicente described, because some exhibitions at Tate are charged, but many things are also free, and the Serpentine is entirely free. But free admission is not enough. I think it's really, really important to think that still with free admission, it happens behind the door. So I think for the future of the museum, we need to think about the fact what happens or what we can do to actually bring art into society, something many artists are interested in now. And that goes far beyond public art. Public art is one possibility, but also the idea, in a way, of going into many different communities. And that's the project we are showing here at the Triennale in Stefano's show. It's a Serpentine project called Radio Ballads, where we basically invited 4 artists into the borough of Barking Dagenham, where, most people do not have access to a museum, do not have access to contemporary art. The artists worked in a very longue durée way for several years, developed films which we then show both in Barking Dagenham and the Serpentine. And that means the future of the museum, in that sense, is an archipelago and not a continental logic. So I think for the future of the museum, I always return
to my mentor, to Edouard Glissant, with whom I spent a lot of time, discussing the future of the museum. And Edouard, of course, the philosopher, poet from Martinique, visionary philosopher, developed this concept of the archipelago museum. That basically a museum would not follow a homogenizing continental logic, where you bring everything into one building, but that it would become an archipelago and could, for that very reason, also go into many different, basically, communities. The last point I wanted to mention is technology, because I think, in a way, the future of the museum will go beyond the dichotomy between, the digital and the analog. I think the future of the museum will be mixed reality, in the sense of it will bring together very physical installations, but it will be multisensory and will always also have digital components. And of course, we have extreme changes happening now with AI. And I think it is fascinating that artists are actually working today with AI and showing us possibilities how AI can work differently. And we've just worked at the Serpentine with Holly Hunt and Matt Dryhurst. And I think they've shown us, Holly and Matt have shown us very much what a future museum can be. So there will never be the future museum. There will be many models, many possibilities. And they basically looked at AI as a coordination technology, because of course for millennia, we've had group singing, like call and response, choirs, rituals for mass communication. And it's interesting, I think, that we live in a world of communication, which is often bereft of rituals. So I think, in a way, the Museum of the Future will also reintroduce rituals. And that's what Holly and Matt did with AI, showing us a possibility to work with it in an ethical way.
Great. Thank you very much, Hans, for a very detailed expose of all point by point. I will be coming back to you guys, by the way, because Vicente, you didn't get a chance to define your museum for us. You kept talking about tape. So we'll come back, and I'll come back to Courtney. But I would love to hear from Simo and Njami, Simon. It's wonderful to have you, Simon. You are a writer, an art critic, and a curator. And take it away. I mean, tell us what you think.
I shall take it away. It's always interesting to be in this gathering with friends, etc., etc. But I'm not sure the museum has a future.
Wow, that's okay.
No, I mean, I used to love museums. I'm still going to the Louvre, etc. I have the feeling to be forever young because it hasn't changed, which is good. It's like a strange mirror, as if I sold my soul to somebody. There's a moment where there's been a very strange operation in me. I think around the age of 35 or 40, I discovered that I was not only Swiss, but I was also Cameroonian. And this changed my perspective about the museum. Because if you've noticed, the museum we're talking about are European museum or Western museum. And we know how museums were constructed, sort of power structure, etc., etc. So I'm not sure that within those old things, how can we refurbish the Louvre? We can create a little contemporary art space there, temporary. We can use digital images. We can project the Gioconda in a 3D, but this is not going to change the Louvre. And I think that the museum should have been conceived, and things are moving. It's funny because this guy is not running a museum, but an art space. Different. Museums have collections. A collection. I know you know. I know you've done your work. They have collection, and to have a collection means a lot of things regarding the way one can move and one can dialogue. We've been having problems not only with museum but with contemporary art, etc., with the audience. How do we reach the audience? How do we manage to change those temples into agoras? And I think that the other part of the world that is not Western, I've been thinking about what is the meaning of a museum. Unfortunately, some stupid president are just replicating a model that is no longer functioning. But the notion of agora, I think, is the future of a museum. And I would suggest, actually, that we call my friend from Latin America, from Africa, from Chile, from everywhere, to help Europe to rethink the notion of museum. But if the museum has to just be this temple that changes things, that create values that are at least problematic at times. If the museum is this place where treasures are collected, as you know very well, there's a very tiny little percentage of the collection that are shown in museums. So what do we do with it? What do we rethink the usness today? How do I retrieve my Swissitude when I go in a museum and I feel okay as well as an African or as a Latin American? How do we create spaces, not only for ourselves, for our own glory, but places for everyone? I remember I had a conference at the Beaux-Arts in Paris where they had a little problem. They discovered that 95% of the students were European. And among the 95%, 90% were coming from wealthy families. And they were like, oh, this is not France. This is not representative. I think that the notion of representing, we have an orange guy in the United States of America who doesn't know what it means to represent. I mean, the notion of representing is at the core of the notion of democracy.
I hear you.
The museum must reflect the people.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Simon. I appreciate it. So again, I'd like to go back to Vicente, because Vicente, I didn't give you a chance to philosophize and give us your definition of how you see the museum evolving into the future.
Yeah. Well, I think a museum is not a building. It's not a building. No, it's a collection and an activity of displays and an exhibition program. So program is essential, but it can happen anywhere. So we can just not fetishize these buildings like it happens now. And but mainly, it has to be independent. That means independent programming. So the minute...
Independent of whom?
Independent of numbers, of income, of ticket sales. Because if you depend on that, then you are not serving the art, which is the main function, and the artist of museum. You're using art to maintain yourself or get bigger and expand, and then you are a traitor to your mission. Then they don't make any sense. They are commercial enterprises, and it should be called commercial and not non-profit. No? So also I believe that museums should have free entrance, because I remember at the time of COVID, I got a call from a journalist, and they were calling different museum directors. How does the lockdown impacted you? I said, zero, because we don't have income from entrance. It's free entrance. So nothing. Instead, people that were depending on that, they sank. And then they had to change their program in order to have more income. So I've been a witness to that in many museums, and how 1 year you will have, for example, by chance, quite a number of visitors, and then the income from the government would be reduced so that you would, again, get a target of more visitors and more and more and more. And I gave an interview to the Times that the headline was, give us the fucking money. Where I was telling a story of a farmer in my village that was training the donkey not to eat. And when he managed, the donkey died. So that's the danger of museums.
I love the donkey analogy. Thank you, Vicente. By the way, if those of you, the very few in this room who don't know Vicente, Vicente is a great artistic director and museum director, but he's also someone who has an incredible citrus farm. He has citrus fruits like the lemon this big. I've seen it with my own eyes. He also makes olive oil. But anyway, That's just on the side. Courtney, I don't know what you do on the side. Maybe you make olive oil too. But I would love to hear from you, Courtney, because we haven't heard enough from you. You're theorizing about the Museum of the Future.
I can't know. And I say that really because I think that there's, the museum gets remade daily at times. There are ways in which the slow transformation of a museum is only revealed after a decade. We have seen upheavals in staffing, the museum used as a platform, the museum used as a space of confrontation. We've seen the museum used as a foil. Sometimes I think in greater debates about completely different things. It's a charged place. And so you can only follow that of the public that it's serving at that moment to understand where that charge is. I can tell you what the Museum of Today looks like, right? But I can't.
Please do.
I think the Museum of Today looks like a place that every single social, cultural, political, and ethical battle that is happening everywhere else is actually happening inside of the museum. And in many ways, it happened there first. And so when some of us a decade ago were saying, our staff, is asked questions about equity. Our staff is asked questions about a public. Our staff says, making a museum free actually doesn't help people coming in because people don't know what to do when they get there, or being free doesn't help you understand how to cross the threshold of a place in which you feel labored once you get inside. All of those kinds of things happen first in the museum and then they spread out. And I don't think the museum is the only place that it happened, but I think it is the largest scale single type of institution that you can see across multiple continents in which it happened. And that connection, I think, is wholly dependent upon the fact that it's artists. So it would be very difficult, I think, for institutions to come to that kind of reckoning themselves. They're pushed along by artists, even if that is, if it's passive. I don't think that artists are looking necessarily at the people. I think that artists are, they're making their work, right? But it is how we then have to interpret that work that changes how we see ourselves in the places that we are.
Great. How much time do we have here? Because 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay. Well, in the meantime, this is such an incredible cauldron of ideas here. I'm taking notes. I don't usually take notes when I'm moderating. I'm just jotting stuff. Every single speaker comes up with these definitions, which interests me a lot. But you might have questions. Is there anyone in the room who'd like to ask something while Kim tells me how much time we have? Yes, please. Alain Servet. Do we have a microphone, or you could just maybe speak up, Alain? Yes, we don't have a microphone.
We are discussing what the museum should be, but can we not take into account what the society is turning into? Meaning, yes, we can get more people in the museum and make more people happy if we give them more entertainment. Should the museum stay as an institution which is trying to give some kind of level of culture which is not the lowest common denominator to people? So should the museum stay elitist or go down the drain of
Yeah, I mean, should the museum be all things to all people, or should it remain, like not lowest common denominator? I don't know who wants to take that question.
At Pirelli HangarBicocca, our slogan is art to the people, not art for the people. That says everything.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Hans, go ahead.
Also, it's a very interesting question. Thank you. And I think in a way that it needs to kind of be both most advanced in terms of research, yet accessible. So, which is something Agnes Varda always told me. She says, she wants to make films which are most accessible for everyone, but at the same time also advanced in terms of a research. I think there are different layers to that. No, I mean, obviously the collection is fundamental, and in a way, the future can be invented with fragments from the past. So I think it's incredibly important that we can have artists, contemporary artists, view on the collection, something Suzanne Paget did in such an incredible way when she was at the Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris for so many years. She showed us that the future can be invented with fragments from the past. And I think it's kind of a tripartite element. There is incubation, so museums have to be laboratory where knowledge is being produced. Then there is production. I think it's about making projects happening. That means realizing sometimes artists' unrealized projects, artists' dreams should be realized. That can also be in relation to the past, no? In a way, new perspectives, on works. Something very interesting, Agosti's exhibition in the Triennale gives us a completely new, through history, a completely new perspective. And then the third level is engagement. It's engagement where we then have to kind of reach as many people as possible. So I think the tripartite thing.
Simon, or is it Simon or Simon? I don't know.
It depends on the language.
Okay. Well, I speak both. Which one should I? Anyway.
Simone will do.
Simon. No, but Simon, before you continue, can you tell us a little bit where are you based now? I mean, do you several places or?
I pay my taxes in Paris, but I'm in Paris.
Poor you.
Yeah, I know. I'm there 3 months a year because I was told that when you're traveling, you stay young. So I'm traveling a lot. It doesn't work that much. No, regarding the future of the museum, yes, of course, inclusion. And what I mean by inclusion is not necessarily the audience. I don't think, and I agree with everyone here, that a free entrance is what is going to sort out the problem. We have everywhere around the world, we have social problem. We have social equation that we need to sort out. And I think that the museum should be the reservoir, the laboratory of what is happening outside. And I think that the way to refresh it is not to change the painting, it's to change the artist. And there's another thing we have to bear in mind. There's a foundation here, 2 foundations, is that the museum is not alone. There's a whole landscape that should work together with a certain coordination. I don't think everybody should go to a museum. They should go wherever they want. But it's about the choice. If they don't go to the museum, why can they go? In a place like Paris, which is very vibrant, we have an art modern museum where the young artists that are seen there are at least 50 years old. Then you have a lot of foundation, then you don't have a place, literally, in Paris for contemporary artists, I mean, young generation. So how do we want to reflect our society when, I remember I love Louise Bourgeois, but I remember when she was representing France in Venice, I was like, well, a young upcoming artist. So we have totally to reflect on what is the kind of society we want. And not only on a national level, but with an international collaboration. We're not alone. The problems in Milan or in Paris are not just in Milan and Paris.
Okay, to be fair to Louise Bourgeois, she spent most of her career being completely ignored. So I've written a book about this, which Hans knows about. The fact that women were completely erased from art history. And the reason why she was so old was because for most of her life, and there were many others.
And nothing personal, it was just easy, excuse me.
Yeah. Okay, great. Listen, we have, maybe I think a couple minutes, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Courtney, you're looking at me with sparkling eyes. Please tell me what your thoughts are.
I really, today I had hoped to go and see the exhibition at Novecento, which is the Robert Rauschenberg show that is on right now, that is an infusion into the collection that is there with artists of Italian artists of different generations. On paper, it looks incredible. It has an incredible checklist. I'm so excited to see it, but it was closed today because the workers were striking. And I actually think that's incredibly poignant because I would not have known that they were striking had I not wanted to go see the show, but I now know what they were striking about because I wanted to go see the show. And so would anybody else who went there. The other people that I saw standing outside the door seemed to have the same question. And so I do think that there is something to be said about this museum as a platform. And I think that we should all take it very seriously, maybe because some of us are very inside of it. It feels turbulent at moments, but I actually I'm excited by how much attention, even if that attention can feel negative, that the museum receives right now. It is on the front page of the New York Times at least once a week in some form. It's a good thing.
Great. Well, thanks. I'll take that on board. So I think just in closing, it would be wonderful, Hans, I think you have a few words in a panel on the future of the institution and the institution of the future. It would be nice to hear from Hans paying homage to our friend Koyo, who thought a great deal about the future of the institution and who had such brilliant and groundbreaking ideas that not only did she create a groundbreaking museum, Zeitz-MoCA, or lead it, but she was also going to lead the next Venice Biennale. So we are in Italy, I guess, leaderless on that front. But please, Hans, take it away.
Thank you, Farah. And I've been, like you, also taking lots of notes because so many, ideas and definition of the museum. And I kind of wanted just to add one, and that has to do with Koyo, remembering Koyo here, because Koyo actually told me the same thing Felix González Torres also told me. And that's basically that an art institution should be home. It should be home to the people. It should be home to the artists, very important also. There are very few, museums where artists would say that's home for me. But when they do it, it's a really great sign. And I just want to read here what Koyo said. Actually, she said it very beautifully in a conversation with Andras Santo in his book about the future of the museum, where Andras interviewed lots of people, museum directors, about 4 or 5 years ago, where Koyo defined this idea of the museum as home. A home for art, a home for art professionals, a home for artists, a home in the sense of hospitality, of sharing, of communion, and a site of contemplation and convergence where ideas and objects intersect to produce meaning and social value. Koyo Kuo.
That's such a wonderful... There are many close friends of Koyo, including at least 2 on this panel, possibly more. So I thought that was a really wonderful way for us to take leave of you, and thank you for being here in Milan at Palazzo Reale, listening to my really scintillating and brilliant speakers who've given me a lot to think about. I hope you feel the same. Thank you so much.